You are listening to the sounds of the Right On Network.
All right, we're back with On the Record Jams. This is episode 4, brought to you by the Right On Network. I'm AJ, along with me is Arthur. Hello, Arthur.
Hello, AJ. We're back. We got two good ones today, so I'm really excited to get into it.
I am too. We are here with episode 4. I've been very excited about this new podcast brought to you by the Right On Network. A lot of people are excited about it. We're talking about some music, man. And we're going to start this one off. I'm going to bring something on the record. I want to bring on the song, the single Baby Love by the Supremes, came out in 1964. Arthur, you're familiar with this one?
Oh, yeah.
So, and this is straight out of Motor City, right? Motown?
Yep, this is Motown. This is the Hit Factory or whatever you want to call it. And we've discussed them quite a bit. And this is one of those. We haven't brought up the Supremes yet. So I think this is a good chance to put some paint where it hadn't been before. So please, yes, let's do it.
So, okay, I was born in 1979. So, when I get consciousness that I'm a human being and all that, fully, let's say like I'm 4, 5, 6 years old. So you're watching television and they'll play commercials where they're trying to sell you greatest hits, and you're seeing the Supremes. You're seeing Baby Love, Stop in the Name of Love. I think that's the one that really affected me. And if you were watching television, those people that were kids in the 50s and 60s, now they're adults and they're show running and they're throwing that music in the background. So you were around the Supremes a lot growing up in the 80s. And I just wanted to say that I knew someone from Europe, and when they were a little kid, it would be like the Supremes or like black girl groups in the shop window. So she would say, like, hey, I'm walking home from school. And you look in that shop window, she said she would just stare at the vinyl record for minutes and minutes because they look like superheroes. So, like, even I'm a kid growing up in the 80s, I'm not a part of my childhood, wasn't in 1964. But even me in the 80s, I would look at them like, oh, they seem bigger than life. They seem like these, like America's aunties, right? And it was a really big deal seeing Diana Ross in The Wiz. I remember like my mind was blown. I was like, whoa, she was in a movie? Like that was I was like, wow, Nipsey Russell. So with the Supremes, this to me is just ultra cool. And I could imagine, I'm gonna put this on some people, maybe it's not fair, but I could imagine probably there were a bunch of folks where the Supremes, it was the first time they saw something like that in life, right? Like
Yeah.
they may have never even seen it in life. Like maybe we would have seen it like, oh, I went to a church and there was some people kind of like that. I went to the store, there were some people kind of like that. But with the Supremes and other girl groups like that, it may have been, I didn't even know that existed. So that's mind blowing.
Yeah, that's a good point you make because they, especially you're talking about pre-desegregation, even in the United States as well. So you wouldn't even have to go abroad to get some level of like oddness to this group or just Motown in general being around making the songs they're making and having those things be hits and having them kind of elbow their way into the room.
Hmm.
And especially also too with girl groups. I mean, they had more than one, but the Supremes, when they hit, they started hitting and then they just kept on hitting until they broke up finally.
And I also, I can't remember, it was in like 2001. I was reading this article in the Rolling Stone, and they wrote something about this song is like one where like they'll play it 20 times in a row and then move on. And I'll catch myself doing that every once in a while, like every 4 years. I'll just play the song like 7 times in a row and then I'll move on with my life because I think this is like ABC 1, 2, 3 pop music production. Like I think this is just the structure. And then when you try to do something weird and odd, it's bouncing out of this. I just think this is because for me, it has all the hallmarks that will make a mark for me. It's background vocals, and also they would do this. It's not that much in this production, but a lot of times 1950s music, this is 1960s, it'll scare me because it has this like haunting reverb. And well, again, growing up in the 80s when they would make movies like Christine or Heavenly Kid, where, hey, we want to reminisce about the 50s. And it would always be about like, not always, but it'll be a teenager and they're in their 50s Chevrolet or whatever. And they're playing chicken where, hey, we're going to drive. And the first person to jump out the car, you're a chicken. And then the one person like, oh, I can't get out the car. And they go over the cliff. Or it'd be something where like, hey, I'm a teenager, I die, and I'm coming back, I'm haunting everybody, whatever. So 50s music, it kind of scares me. This borderlines have that reverb, but not much. But but again, it makes them sound like they're these ethereal deities, and they're coming down and like, hey, here's some pop music, and then they leave.
Yeah, I could get with that. It's funny though, because I always talk about this subtext, right? Of Motown trying to play the game, but they're also trying to sneak in their content. And the Supremes made a big habit of having all these love torn anthems, right? Where the music doesn't match the mood of the song. And you got Diana Ross having to do a lot of heavy lifting with her tone and her delivery to get the point across that, hey, this music sounds happy and go lucky, but I'm singing about something that's sneaky deep here. And like, I'm trying to get somebody to stay with me. I'm trying to get somebody to not give up on what we have in a relationship. And it's like so many of their hit songs follow along that line of them trying to, convince somebody almost that, what they're doing is worth hanging on to. And yeah, Baby Love is another one of those.
About like, hey, the music sounds lovely, but the lyrics are sneaky, putting their message in.
Yeah, you make a good point. We were talking, something I bring up a lot with Motown is their subtext and their attempts to, work a lot of different things into their song. So the music sounds cheerful and upbeat, but then the message of the music is something else. And the Supremes did that a lot in a lot of their songs. So don't throw our love away. Why must we separate my love? Like you hear it in this song and you hear it in a lot of their hits. And so it's very interesting how they try to get that stuff in there. I always accuse Motown of being very sneaky, and there's a lot of proof that they are.
So did they go from being the Supremes to Diana Ross and the Supremes, and then Diana Ross went solo, and then they went back to the Supremes?
Yeah, that's what happened. So the Supremes, their hit run was basically starting around the time of this song. So Baby Love was the second hit in a string of hits. And somewhere, let's say 67, 68 is when they went to the Diana Ross and the Supremes name of course, to make that a little bit more sneaky and weird. That was during the time where it was very obvious that her and Barry Gordy were together and an item. And
Mhm.
then they broke up, quote unquote, around the time she went single. But they had a child together right after that as well. So, it was a really wild period of time for them. But they spent before 64, they couldn't have hits. They were recording songs, and Motown wasn't totally serious about them as an act. And they would do the extra work in the studio. So they would come in and do the hand claps and the background stuff on other people's songs just to kind of keep their faces in the place because people didn't even want to write songs for them because the idea was that they were too young, they weren't going to hit, and then when they started recording songs, they weren't hitting, and so they used to be called the No Hit Supremes
Mm.
at the studio. So when they finally started hitting, they were like, "Oh, you want some hits?" And of course, they were the first Motown group to have two number ones back to back. So they're like, "You want some hits? Here's some hits for you," and then they just went to town.
Again, where they come off like these comic book superheroes. Uh, this record came out in 1964. This is after the Kennedy assassination, where it's like, man, it's televised. It seems like there's no tomorrow. And so America is looking for, or the world's looking for happiness. And you get this, you get the Supremes.
Yeah, the
So like how
glamour
they
and
start
yeah.
off, yeah, the glamour, like they start off kind of stutter stepping, slow out the gate, and now this, boom. And like you said, the glamour is like where hip hop, where they were dressed like they're from outer space, and then Run DMC is like, hey, what if we just dress like people from around the block? And with this, with the Supremes, this looks like, I mean, the name is the Supremes. So it seems like, man, they're not touchable. Like they're hovering above us, Arthur.
Yeah, I like that. That's that, and that was the entire point. They really wanted to blow him up once they decided to get behind him and make him a thing. You could argue whether that was uh, Diana doing her work in the background, being with Barry Gordy and having a relationship with him, but whatever it was, that was the decision on how to present that group, and they went all in on it. But when you think about it, that was happening with the male groups all the time. You look at how they dressed, you look at how they performed, how tight their choreography was. That wasn't a new thing for the 60s. That was happening before that as well, because it was kind of a part of the idea of trying to really be a professional outfit to say, hey, look at what we have on, look at how we're performing, look at how smooth and cool we are. You can't do what we're doing. You can't even pretend that you're gonna do what we're doing. Like, cause this is us, and we're gonna name ourselves like the Miracles, the Supremes, the Shy Lights, the something that you can't be's. Like that's pretty
Right.
much what they were all calling themselves. Like, this is not you and your cousins.
Yeah.
This is serious.
Hey, we're not just from Ohio. We are the Ohio players.
Yeah, the Ohio players.
The definitive article, you might say.
Yes, like don't come over here to Ohio trying to play nothing and think you're gonna be better than us because we are the ones. Ask everybody in Ohio.
Look, yeah, Arthur, when the background vocals, when they do that, don't throw our love away, don't throw our love away. And again, it's kind of faint in the background, sounds like ghosts. I just think it's effective. It's
Of
oh my
course.
gosh, this is a good record.
It is a really good record. And also you think with that group, it was a trio by the time they started making hits. And everybody had it in their head that they kind of wanted to be they wanted to be lead singers. And when they weren't having hits, they were splitting the duties. And then eventually it got to the point where you're dealing with a lot of Diana Ross in the front and the other two vocalists trying to get their stuff in, basically. And they took whatever opportunity they got. They were almost like a musician trying to get their stuff in. Like you hear these horn solos that last 10 seconds, and those horn dudes are like, this is my 10 seconds. I'm gonna kill it. And I view like the vamp outs and the backgrounds, like I think that's what that same energy was there. Like, don't throw our love away. Like, this is all you're gonna let me say, so I'm gonna say it and I'm gonna kill it.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is a song where, yeah, they have that horn solo and it works.
Yep, it's a really good time in a short period of time. And once they struck that nerve, they just kept kind of dancing around this same general thing, even though, yeah, the sounds changed. And I'm sure if you get into it, the keys and the tempos are slightly different, but they hit a mood and they just rode it as long as they could through all the relationship stuff, the lineup changes, everything they went through to get that music out, and also just fighting with each other, obviously as a part of that Motown machine, trying to make sure you keep your place once you get a spot in that type of label environment. Because if people start wanting too much money or start thinking that they're bigger than the group or all of those different things that we see on all the documentaries that we all now have. I mean, everything was so tenuous and nobody had any reason to think they were just going to be around forever. Like they just didn't. So they were maxing it out with whatever they had. And you can, in some cases, you could tell yourself a story that you hear that stuff in the music, especially when you have to be so compact with the 2.5, 3 minute songs.
Was Dreamgirls based on the Supremes narrative?
I think it was a mix of a few different things.
Yeah.
I mean, the Diana relationship with the other girls in the group, the Diana relationship with Barry Gordy, of course, was a big part of it. They did what they could. I mean, even with Dreamgirls, you talk about that group being based out of Detroit too, so they weren't exactly sneaky about it, right? Like,
So, as far as the vocal talent, the strongest vocalist, who do you think the strongest vocalist was in the group?
oh well,
I'm just
uh,
throwing your curveball there
that is a curveball. I
because
think
I
that's a
remember Dreamgirls that was broached where they put the uh, Beyonce character in the front, but they talked about like, hey, you don't really have the strongest voice. It's just you have the look.
Yeah, I think that some of those things came from Diana, but I think you know how the meme says growing up means you now understand. Like I think growing up means I now understand that Diana Ross was a hell of a singer. And it
Hmm.
wasn't just about the hitting the notes. Just like when we talk about hip hop, it's not just about slapping together a bunch of syllables. It's what are you saying? How are you getting it across? Do people quote unquote feel what you're saying? And can you emote? And if you can emote when you sing, you're a good singer, period. And
Hmm.
you can hear some Diana Ross songs and give her a shot and just listen. Okay, maybe some of those notes aren't coming out as clean as a top shelf singer, but she's getting that feeling across. I mean, especially when you go later on into her solo stuff as she got older and more confident. I mean, don't start me on Upside Down. We could talk about that all day.
Oh, I have the vinyl record over there. We'll put that on the record at some point.
Yeah, that's a killer right there. And I mean,
Hmm.
that's during the disco era, and she was doing a Barry White homage and everything, and she still killed it. I mean, she just got it all the way across.
Yeah. Also, like right here it goes, cause baby love, been missing you. Instead of breaking up, let's do some kissing and making up. Don't throw our love away. In my arms, why don't you stay? Need you, baby love, ooh, baby love. Now, in the 50s, you're getting some of this, but now, rock and roll, it's on even a more mainstream level. So I think even just the diction that they're doing here might be the first time where some people were exposed to that.
Right. You make that point. I mean, that sounds very mild compared to
Yes.
WAP and some of the stuff we got now. Some of the stuff we got now. But yeah, they were taking some chances going into a little bit more detail than what people would do as far as mainstream pop radio music. Like that was bold stuff at that time.
Writers Brian Holland, Edward Holland, and Lamont Dozier.
Yep, that's the crew right there, man. They got a lot of hits under their belt, and once they started working, because with the Supremes, before they were working with that trio, it was a lot of Barry Gordy and Smokey Robinson doing the writing, because that's where their end was, because Diana Ross knew Smokey. And so that was their end to try to get in the label. And of course, Smokey was the king of writing a lot of jams. He had his own group at that time as well. And he was like, yeah, when I can, if I make something I kind of don't like, I'll give it to y'all, like he was kind of getting them in that way. And, they just kept on trying and trying and trying. And once they got with the trio and started making those hits, they just kind of found their place. They got old enough. People trusted them more. They did all that. I mentioned it before. All that background work kind of give people the impression that they were serious and they wanted to be stars and stuff. And yeah, they wanted to glam it up and be superheroes, like you mentioned. But they were willing to come in the studio and help and be in the background. And I think we've seen that over the course of music history a lot, where people are in the background until they get their shot. And then once they make it, you find out like, oh yeah, these people were singing background for 10 years.
Mm.
before they got on, or they were trying to be a group since the late 50s. And then we're talking about 1964, by the time they have their first real big hits. So, 6 years of singles and songs and being in the background and trying to do your thing and hope that you can, finally have something hit. You got your own label mates making fun of you because your stuff comes out and it doesn't hit. And then you start hitting. Like that's not overnight success. That's work.
And it's a song that still resonates today as far as like sonically how it sounds. Like I think it's still effective. Like you're saying, um, Diana Ross is doing lead on this. Do you feel what she's saying? Is it hitting you in all the right ways? It is. I mean, my gosh, it's just powerful stuff. I just think it's powerful stuff.
Right. And you think
Um,
about the era we got, right? Where I don't know when this was. You can get, let's say, 2005 to 2015, where that super retro 60s sound came back.
yeah.
And a lot of people made a lot of money making those type of songs and kind of doing that to make it obvious. Like, hey, we're trying to go back to basics. We're trying to put vocals at the forefront. And I think that really helped this era of music get another set of ears, which I really love when those things happen.
Now, again, with turning a phrase where, like, now we hear, we're like, oh, okay. But maybe back then it was like, oh, I never really heard it that way before. So, like in the late 90s, there was the movie with Tom Cruise called Jerry Maguire. And there was a part at the end where, he gives his big Tom Cruise speech. And the response with Renee Zellweger was just simply, you had me at hello. And I remember like people went bonkers over that because that was the first time something like that had ever been said. You had me at hello. Like you said hello and then you said all this stuff and that was wonderful, but you had me at hello. And I remember this guy from Germany where he didn't know much English. He was fascinated by that. He was like, okay, that's because he knew English well and like its syntax and its order and what it should do. But he was like, huh, you had me at hello. It was like, that you knew like something happened there. What is that? So like here in this song, Baby Love, Baby Love, where it goes, why you do me like you do, right? And
Yeah.
please don't do me this way. Again, I'm wondering if those lines just themselves, was that something where, hey, I'm 12 years old and I'm in Kansas. I never heard someone turn a phrase like that.
You bet. I mean, because that was something that was the precursor to when it was a lot more obvious, like when the 70s music came in and you get that whole new influx of lingo, and that lingo is making it into the music, the right-ons and the jive and the, all those phrases that we all now link to the 70s. Well, the 60s, it was a little bit less obvious, but it was the same thing. Like, do me like you do. Like, okay, yeah, that they brought that stuff to the forefront. And then the 70s was just another case of branching out with that and making it more obvious that, hey, this is our lingo and this is what we're trying to do. And obviously, with our beloved hip hop artists, a lot of them in the 90s came and just raised the stakes on that even more, building their own slang, building their own vernaculars, and then building all this music off of it. Where then now it's a time capsule for how people were talking during that period of time. In the phrase, like you say, to turn in those phrases. Well, hip hop is so much of it is about turning phrases and creating phrases and like adding things to the lexicon of how things get said going forward. Like it's a part of music in general, and it's really exciting when you can pull those out, right, in different eras, because it gives you a little snapshot to what people were thinking about and how things were going, depending on how deep you go into it.
Well, Arthur, that was the Supremes' Baby Love. Came out in 1964 and going strong. So we're going to take a short break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about what Arthur is putting on the record.
I'm excited.
It's time for some thrilling heroics, a brand new podcast on twotruefreaks.com. Keep Flying, a Firefly podcast. We aim to do the impossible, cover every episode of Joss Whedon's science fiction space opera western, and that makes us mighty. We found as fine a crew as ever populated the podcasting verse. I told them I had a job, they said yes. Didn't much care what it was. So join me, Andrew Leyland. I fought for the independents. May have been the losing side, not so sure it was the wrong one. I'm joined by a man too pretty to die, Mr. Paul Spataro. And last but by no means least, a man with a mighty fine hat, Shepherd Bill Robinson. So join us on twotruefreaks.com for Keep Flying, a Firefly podcast. We aim to misbehave.
Welcome back to episode 4 of On the Record Jams, brought to you by the Right On Network. I'm AJ. We have Arthur here with you. Arthur, what are you putting on the record?
I'm going to put one song on the record as an excuse to put an artist on the record and a whole period of time on the record. We'll see how far we can get into it. 1998 is where I'm going. I'm going to OutKast's third album. And I'm using Skew It on the Barbie as my excuse to talk about OutKast for as long as you'll let me do it.
Please do it, because there's as that radiating context that you're talking about. I want to get into that as well.
Excellent. So Skew It on the Barbie, we're talking 1998. So kind of laying that out. Hip hop is a big deal. People are making money off of this. We've had Tupac gets shot and killed in the fall of 96. The same thing happens to Biggie in spring of 97. And there's a very big emphasis on the East Coast as far as how the hip hop media is almost all out of New York. The tastemakers, a lot of them are based in New York. And sure, you have the other coast, you have LA, and we had the early 90s with Dr. Dre and Snoop, and before that, NWA and that whole crew, which of course also had Dr. Dre, interesting. But in the middle of that, you had the South in the middle doing a little bit of both and trying to make their music. Then you use the 1995 Source Awards, which I think people focus on how horrible and dangerous and terrible it was. But there was a really important moment at that award when OutKast won an award, and the crowd, which was highly an East Coast crowd, wasn't having a great time seeing OutKast on that stage. And, Andre Benjamin, who wasn't Andre 3000 at that time, was really frustrated because he felt the disdain. He felt the lack of interest. And that's when he gave us the line that we all hear a million times every time online, is that, hey, the South's got something to say. And that was like a declaration for 1995. OutKast came out with ATLiens in 1996. Things went well. The South was putting out a lot of music. Scarface, Master P, Cash Money, 8 Ball MJG, UGK. There's amazing music from the South all through the middle of the 90s. But it was still kind of viewed like, well, that's those guys down there doing their weird stuff. But OutKast was on Arista and LaFace Records. And so they had enough of a footprint in the industry, and that label was big enough that they could kind of make a decision and say, okay, we know the South's got something to say, and we're going to put it in your face. And Atlanta's becoming a big deal. A lot of people are moving here to get their music out. And as LaFace / Arista, we have OutKast. And we're going to make you guys understand OutKast. And to make sure you get it, we're going to put an East Coast rapper on the song, make it a video, and we're going to put this thing out just so that you understand, like, OutKast, forget regions. These are great rappers, both of them. And we're going to have them do a back and forth. We're going to chop up verses with Raekwon the Chef, who I love. And Andre 3000 goes first, Raekwon goes second, and Big Boy closes it out. And that's why I wanted to pick Skewered on the Barbie, because that's, to me, I viewed that song was very intentional. Like them making it a single, them getting Raekwon to do it with them, and them saying, "Hey, we're serious here. We're not trying to be good for rappers from the South. We're trying to be good, period." And Aquemini and this song and that whole little period of time made it very obvious that OutKast was here to stay.
Yeah, okay. Talking about 1998, I think 97, 98, 99. I think it's just pinnacle. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to express this, but you mentioned Raekwon from Wu-Tang Clan, and when they did Enter 36 Chambers, that was a period of time. That was a time capsule, right? So if they went on somewhere in 2024 and freestyle rap like they were rapping in on Enter 36 Chambers, which it came out in 93. So some of that stuff they may have recorded in 92, 91. If they went on some freestyle show and rap like that, it would sound like, oh, they're dated. They're, that sounds like dated rap. If someone like from 1986, 1982, the way they were rapping then, if they went on a freestyle show in 2024 and rap like that, it'd be like, oh, you know what, they have some good lines, but it sounds like real dated rap. Now, if you take just random albums in 1998 and however they were rapping, like this song, Skewered on the Barbecue, this came out in 1998. If someone in 2024 did a freestyle and they were rapping like this on that cadence, you would just go, oh man, they're really good at rap. You wouldn't think like now it might be like just stylistically, like, well, I don't really listen to that. Like I'm listening to trap music, so yeah, that's good. I don't even care about how they're rapping. But like if someone raps like how people were rapping in 1998, like let's say in 1998, you thought, man, that's a great MC. They can rap like that now in 2024, and someone will go, man, they're pretty good. That's
Yeah.
why I think that time period of 97 and 1999, hip hop like created 1974, 1970, and then it leads to 97, 98, 99. And now, because you wouldn't get 97, 98, 99 if it wasn't for all the stuff that happened before that. I don't know, American slavery, jazz music, the Supremes. I get it. Yes. All right. The Motown sound. All of that, beat poetry, all that. I get it. All of that leads to 1997, 1998, 1999. And now we're in 2024. It's because everything is spinning out of that time period. Even if you're like, I don't sound like anything from 97, 98, 99, because you are rebelling against that new standard now. Like, hey, I had to learn the rules first and then I broke them because now I know what I'm breaking to make a new whole genre. So that's why, like, when you picked something from Aquemini, I was like, well, that's interesting. And then when you picked Skewered on the Barbecue, I thought that was even more interesting because when I think of Aquemini, this is the last song I think about. And now that you mentioned all this, like the politics of this, I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. Because I think even at the time, I was like, wait a minute, Skewered on the Barbecue, all the songs, why this? And I'm a big time Wu-Tang Clan fan. But yeah, this was a tour de force. And I guess I didn't appreciate the regionalism that was going on and how this was a big deal.
Very much so. It was one of the better performances of the rappers doing the, hey, I know these guys all had these problems, but I don't have those type of problems. I got my people. These guys have their people. We can get together and do music if we think we all make good music. And there was a lot of that happening, but some of it turned into cash grabs. So then you ended up it basically where the New York rappers, a lot of them lost a lot of their identity trying to show like, hey, I can do the down south stuff. I like bass lines. I can rap slower. And like they started doing that so much that you almost had to have a East Coast renaissance where your Rock Marcy's and your anything produced by Alchemist showed up. Let's say, 2006, 2008 2008, 2010, that era of time, like you almost needed to reset things for the New York rappers because they went from almost like ignoring the South to a lot of those guys were moving to Atlanta, moving to Florida. And then all of a sudden their music started sounding like what they would hear in that environment. But this was before all that. That was like, it's like they had that conversation with the Wu-Tang guys and Raekwon. They had the whole skit before the song on the album, like, hey, let's do this. Let's rap. Let's see what's going on. And that competitiveness that comes out, like they didn't do the thing where they snuck and dissed each other on the record. But you could tell everybody stepped in there like we're finna put on our best clothes and we're finna show some rapping on this thing. And with Andre being able to kick it off, he just went off. I mean, I mean, for his performance on Aquemini as a whole, you're right. This probably isn't his best verse by any stretch, but he made sure he went off. He had the syllables, he had the embedded rhymes. He did I'm gonna make sure you know this ain't good for the South. This is good, period. So that was another reason why I wanted to pick that as well. No, obviously I love Wu-Tang, and I'm glad that I mean Ray doing this was a really big deal.
Yeah, this song is very consistent. Like I like Aquemini because there is so much quirky things going on it. This song is, I mean, it's straightforward to the point. And you have three rappers with three different styles, like OutKast. They're a group, but these two dudes, they have different deliveries. That to me, that's what makes it interesting. And you have these three people, and it just feels consistent throughout. It's a good record.
It really is a good record. The other thing to think about is I remember this very vividly too, but I had to go look it up to make sure. Aquemini, Jay-Z's Hard Knock Life Volume 2, and Tribe Called Quest, The Love Movement, all came out on the same day. So it's like late September of 1998. All these things came out at the same time. And I remember at that point, my disposable income was not such that I could buy all three at once. And I had to decide, loving all three artists, which one I was going to buy first. And essentially what I did is I bought the OutKast first. And then I went back, the next time I got paid or whatever, and I bought the Jay-Z. So and I was a very big Jay-Z person by that time. Like I was one of the, know what you want to call it, early adopters. I was all about Reasonable Doubt, and I was street teaming for that album everywhere. And people were like, we don't like his voice. It's kind of weird. And then Hard Knock Life came out. He slowed down the flow a little bit as he announced to everybody as he was doing it. And it worked. But yeah, I mean, that's how serious OutKast was to me. Like, hey, I can buy one album. I'm buying OutKast's third album first, and I'm gonna listen to this thing. And I felt like I got paid back 1,000-fold with how many times I listened to this album as a whole. And I was just in a trance. Like, I did the midnight sale. I walked over to the record store close to my little apartment back at that time, and we stood in there and we argued with ourselves about which ones we were gonna get. And it turned into, I think most of us got the OutKast, and we all went and got our little headphones and listened to it and came back out at like 1:45 in the morning, like, ooh, man, this is great. Like, oh man, this is insane. And it was like, I missed those periods of time because of that shared experience of getting the album at the same time, listening to it right then, all the way through, and then just riding around with it, listening to it for weeks, catching the lines, having those songs grow on you that you're like, yeah, I don't know about number 9. Then you listen to it again, and you're like, okay, now number 9 is my favorite song on the whole thing. Like that giving the music time to be digested. Like OutKast was one of several groups that really paid that back if you did that level of work listening to their music.
So maybe it was 95, 96. Whenever Pulp Fiction first came to VHS, like it's at the movies. Then when it first comes to, you can have it at home. I remember watching the movie, and it took me and my friend a long time to complete it because it was so wild. Every time like a new little twist or turn happened, we had to stop it and talk and do all this stuff and then go back and revisit it. That was my experience with Aquemini. I was in Huntsville, Texas. I had to walk everywhere. I don't know if I bought this at a place called the Ear Doctor, where it was a record store, and they would also sell, like, I guess Houston down south screw tapes and other things like that. And I remember one of my college professors was like, "Hey, just go in that store and just pick up the record and just walk out with it because it's bootleg. They're not allowed to sell it. Just take it." I never did that, but I was like, "Oh, that's interesting." So I listened to, and I can't remember, did I read that? I probably did because I think they would have written these reviews before the album came out. I can't remember if I read that Aquemini got 5 mics in Source Magazine first, and then I listened to the album, or did I listen to the album and found out, oh man, they got 5 mics? Because I remember just slowly just getting blown away because I don't think they had to have had a video before the album came out, but I don't remember that. And I just remember, so everything was new, and I was steady getting blown away. Like every third song, I'm like, holy guacamole, like, man, like this is because AT Aliens, it blew our minds. This was like at another level. And I like this when it seemed like there's a lot of artists, it happens with their third album. So it's like the first album's the first album, like, oh, that's interesting. That's pretty cool. And then boom, the second album, like, oh, okay, it stepped it up. And then the third album is like, hey, this is kind of really what we are. And now we're finally are that production wise. We know how to like do this thing now with the bars and all that. We get sonically what to do. The producer and we may have worked with this producer before, so they know our like, little ins and outs. So like on this third album, not all the time, this doesn't happen all the time, but when bands really get this on that third album, it's like, okay, now this is us. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And that's what happened. I know for me, I got blown away. That was my main entry point into, oh, okay, OutKast is serious business. Like, this is not just a group that's going to have one album and disappear. Like, these people are growing into something. They're doing some special stuff, and I'm just going to listen to this album over and over and over again. So that's why I was so prepared when Aquemini came out, and they took even yet another leap forward in who they were and what. And again, like you say, how they were able to get what they were concentrated into the music, where you could really get everything out of it that they were trying to put into it.
Yeah, this definitely was, hey, this is our market. Like, we're here forever. Like, this isn't, we're just going to be around for like this 90s period. We are like, we just guaranteed our future. And even with them not releasing new music, we are still asking like, oh, when are we going to get new music from them? If they make some appearance somewhere, we're like, oh, wow, look at that. We're in 2024. People are asking about some Andre 3000 and Big Boy.
Yep.
We're buying pit bulls from them.
Well, hold on now. I don't know about that. You can, but
remember on Big Boy's like solo album, he also had an ad for like buying some pit bull puppies from him.
I could believe that. Yeah, he was doing that for quite a long time.
Yeah.
But
Final
yeah,
thoughts about this one? Skewered on the Barbecue, Arthur?
Skewered on the Barbie, man. The coming out party for OutKast. I think it broke some of the regional segregation. Made it was another kind of brick get knocked down on that wall for having people saying, "Hey, I don't listen to this because the artist comes from there." Like thinking about our high school life, like we were dealing with that. We were having that conversation on a regular basis. People saying, "Oh yeah, I don't listen to that East Coast stuff." And then East Coast people saying, "Yeah, I don't listen to that Houston and South stuff, man. I don't know what them dudes talking about. Their dialect doesn't work for me. Their slang doesn't work for me. The way they draw out words, like none of that works for me. I'm not with it." And you just had like that self-esteem issue from the rappers from the South trying to get their point across that, hey, just because I'm from this place doesn't mean I can't go everywhere. and then they made the world so much bigger and smaller all at the same time with what they were able to accomplish. And OutKast is, OutKast, I think that's part of the reason why we still talk about them so much, because they were able to deal with the negative impacts of that, but again, put it into the music in a way that you could understand it and appreciate it. Maybe it was easier for us because we were from the South. But you listen to people talk about OutKast now, and it's like, yeah, of course, ATLs was awesome. Aquemini was great. Yeah, we like all of it. Yeah. And it's like, yeah, I don't remember that conversation though. I remember being around people that was still needing to be convinced. And so they had to do these songs like Skew It on the Barbie. They had to, you think about the video they made for the Art of Storytelling, same album, where they did the remix and they had Slick Rick.
Yeah.
Like they had to get cosigns to say, hey, for real, we're good. And the people that you love from the place that you're from, they get it too. So if you don't get it, it's a you problem, not a us problem. And people eventually came around to it.
Yes, when the Source magazine wrote the review to give Aquemini 5 mics, OutKast said that Source magazine were getting bomb threats.
Yeah. Yeah, I can believe that, because you think, if I remember right, and this is me coming off memory without looking it up, because I remember paying so much attention to the mic ratings before I found out Santa Claus wasn't real. That first album.
He has a Twitter.
Yeah. Okay, come get me. But the first album got 4.5 mics. So Southern Playalistic got that. They gave Aquemini 4 mics. If I remember right, I remember being very upset about that, because I love that album. And then I remember being like ready to see what they were going to say about Aquemini. And then when I saw the 5 mics, I was like, okay, so y'all get it now. And then I remember people were arguing because Hard Knock Life didn't get 5 mics. Hard Knock Life, I believe, got 4.5. And then you had it. Then that same thing that I complain about people doing now, like everything's got to be ranked and compared and juxtaposed against one another and all that. And I'm like, man, once I had enough money, I was just jamming. I jammed. I wasn't worried about ranking nothing. Once I got that third Jay-Z album and I heard it, he slowed the music down. He changed the drums. He changed the flow. He really went out of his way to try to be, the type of rapper where you could hear every word, and it worked. And that helped change how music was digested too. Like, so to see those 2 albums come out on the same day and the impact that they had, like we could go on and on for even more time for that. But like you say, this is a really, really important time in the history of hip hop. And some of the music that comes from that, I think the way you spelled it out is perfect, because you could show up with Skew It on the Barbie right now and people would be like, this is some good rapping. I don't know who these people are. I don't know what they're doing. I don't care where they're like. Now people have branched out a little bit more to be like, well, I don't care where this guy is from. Is it jamming? Like, is it jamming? I want to hear something that's good. I'll find out where the person is from later.
Right. Oh, yeah.
And that's a good sign of, where music eventually went to. It's a shame that some of these artists, we probably would have got even more work from them if they didn't have to, use up so much of their energy to convince people that they were good. But, things happen for a reason, right? And maybe these albums wouldn't have been as good if they didn't have to go through that or feel like they were going through that. And to try to get played in places other than their hometown or their region or the places where they hit at. So it's a really interesting historical look back, especially considering we were of age enough to be understanding what was happening at the time. So even us understanding the mic ratings, somebody who's 20 years old, right? They're trying to go back and get the information. If they don't have a tour guide, if they don't have one of us or people who was listening to the music at the time, they're just seeing mic ratings and saying, what's the problem? OutKast got 5 mics for this. And it's like, you don't understand. These got, like, the magazine got bomb threats.
Yeah.
Like you're saying, like it was a thing, like it was a rebellious thing for them to give these guys 5 mics. And then you had people that wouldn't let it go years later. They were doing the thing that people do now. They go into an album that's obviously great. and then they try to find the song that they don't like, and they say, well, track number 13 is obviously not great, so how could this album, they try to grade an album, they try to grade the album like a Scantron, right? Where they try to look for the wrong answer somewhere on the test. And I'm saying that kind of as a joke, but when you think about
Yeah, no, you're not
Aquemini, I think
joking.
it was literally track number 13 because it was Mamacita.
Mm.
And that was one of the songs that OutKast had a big thing about doing freestyles. Uh no. Mamacita was track number 11. But they were doing these freestyles where when you hear the song, it was very clear these guys are just rapping. Kind of like what Snoop did with the Shiznit. Like there's these songs in the 90s where rappers, you could tell a beat came on, nobody wrote anything, and they just went in there and talked their stuff. Well, Mamacita is that song or one of the songs like that on Aquemini. And they let a bunch of different guests on there, and it was a little bit of a weird song, but it's not hey, this album isn't five mics because I don't like Mamacita. But I remember getting online in the early 2000s and like seeing people having that conversation. And I was like, man, these people have lost their mind. What are they doing? And now that's just how people create content now. People just show up and say, this album's great, but what's the worst song on it? And then they get all this engagement. And it's like, well, what are you doing? Like, how are you? Like, I view it almost like people view like you're tearing down castles and statues that don't need to be torn down. You need more people to listen to Aquemini, not less.
I like that. It's he and I, Aquemini. Wow.
Yes.
Well, Arthur, hey, we're going to close this episode of On the Record Jams. We talked about the Supremes, Baby Love, and OutKast. Skew It on the Barbie, featuring Raekwon the Chef out of Staten Island, New York, SINY, a member of the Wu-Tang Clan. I read his autobiography. I thought it was good.
Really?
I thought it was interesting. I read it like 2 Christmases ago.
Nice. Did he go super duper detailed into everything, or it was more about the music, or it was a little mix of both?
Oh, it was about his life. So it helps spells out like I like reading stuff like that because then it reminds you linearly what came first and then this and then that led to this. Like Ray, okay, speaking of it, because it's almost like Andre 3000 is kind of catering his cadence to like how Raekwon would approach it. Maybe I might be way off base with that. But like Raekwon, he talked about like, hey, my rap style, like he said, Jizzy, he was like, you never do like a complete sentence. It's like these phrases. And he said, I got that from like, oh, okay, there's a pizza box right here. So I'm gonna write where like I start at the corner and it's not that much space to write too many words, and then it gets bigger and bigger as I go, and that kind of created my rap style.
That's crazy.
See those kind of things
But it
and
makes so
getting it.
much sense when you think about it.
And like how Only Built for Cuban Links was written and created in Miami. That's
Ah,
where they went to, do the work.
that makes sense. Me and the RZA
Wow.
connect.
Woo. Blow a fuse, you lose.
Woo.
Wow. So, yeah, on the record jams, guys. Arthur, where can they find us if they want to add something on the record about Skew It on the Barbie or Baby Love or our previous episodes of On the Record Jams?
Well, we can go to X. We have On the Record Jams. We have our email, on the record jams at gmail.com. We have a On the Record Facebook page. We can be found if you come find us. And we'd love to talk more detail about music because, yes, we could talk more about these two songs or anything related to these two songs or any of the songs that we bring up or artists or albums. I think we've done a really good job so far of just not trying to be too curated with how we're picking the songs. Like I told you, if you let me do Marvin Gaye every episode, I would have 27 episodes of Marvin Gaye, but I do listen to other artists too. So branching out, picking some different things, and eventually we'll get to some things that are more recent because there are some things really recently that have been really exciting and things that we can pull out from. Maybe we don't have the advantage of being able to look back and see how those songs all impacted things. Like we can look at these, 25, 45, 50-year-old songs. We got a lot of history to draw from and see what happened after that, how those songs, like you talk about, how these songs lead to the inspiration for other songs. Well, maybe an album or a song that came out 5 years ago, you don't get to see that as obvious as obviously, but maybe you have to do a little guesswork. But I think there's some fun in that too, especially again, if you don't let yourself get caught in the comparison and ranking festival and just get into the enjoyment and there's all these great artists doing all this great stuff, trying to be inspired, trying to be inspiring, and they're putting it down for us. And they're really trying to give us something to work with. And just because you hear something on the radio that you don't like doesn't mean that nobody's making anything good. We know that's not true. We talk about it in our chats all the time about how we barely have enough time to listen to the stuff that we know we're going to like whenever we listen to it. Let alone when you listen to new things and give things a chance, because a song kind of jumps into your existence via algorithm, or somebody sends you a link in some chat somewhere and you finally hit play on it while you're waiting for medication or waiting for something at an office somewhere. And you say, you know what, I got my headphones, let me throw this on. And you hit play on it. Like, that's how I ended up with West Side Gun. You gave me that whole album. What was it, Fly God?
Yes.
The one with Mr. T on it. And you brought that up like more than once over a 2 or 3 month period. And I said, let me go save this to my Spotify, so the next time I take a flight or something, I'll listen to it. And so, yeah, I'm sitting on a plane listening, and I'm like, okay, this guy's, number one, he's insane. Number two, these songs are good. And then I get to Mr. T, and I go to write you a message, and I forget that I'm in the air, and I don't have any connection. So I write you a message, and I wait until I land. And like, as soon as I land, I hit send, like, dude, this guy you've been talking about, I finally listened to it. Holy moly, this is great. And it's like that, like those things are still out there for us. You just got to open your mind up enough to believe that it's out there, and you'll find it if you keep looking, right? If you trust your friend group, you find a place online where people are focusing on the good stuff and not just trying to make a list or make a ranking. Like they're trying to point you in the direction of the good stuff because it's still out there. Like I really hope that On the Record and everything we're doing here can be a part of that universe more so than the ranking and complaining and let's talk about 1,000 bottles of baby oil or whatever we're gonna be talking about. Like, forget that. Or
let's try to build a rep on taking something that's precious and destroying it to see if we can throw an apple of discord out in the public. Like that's Arthur and I. That's not what in the Right On Network. That's not what we do. We don't try to get our jollies off of like ripping something to shreds just to gain listeners or whatever.
Yeah, you sure you don't do a 2-hour podcast about how Illmatic really isn't that good or something? Like something ridiculous like that? You sure you don't want to do that? We could be famous. Come on, right?
No, because whenever I seriously don't like something, I won't say much, and it'll be like pulling teeth. So,
yep,
yeah.
That's so much good music, man. Why in the world would you spend time talking about what you don't like when we could spend so much more time digging into the nuances about why we like what we do like?
Yeah, and this is wonderful because at the Right On Network, we do things like the Hunters podcast, Birds of Prey podcast, where we're doing all of it. So it might be some issues where, oh man, I'm not really into this. Whereas with Arthur and myself here on the Record Jams, we are choosing the record. Yeah. And we like and we want to talk about. So we're not purposely choosing something to tear to shreds. So that's another good thing too. So it'll never be like pulling teeth on it.
Nope.
And Nas's Illmatic is a classic, and it is wonderful.
Are you sure though, man? You know that halftime, man. I don't know.
Oh shoot, that's my favorite one on there.
I'm joking.
Yeah, I know. So, guys, and I want to thank our Patreon subscribers. They're helping us grow and go in the year 2024 and beyond. And they're the reason why this particular podcast, On the Record Jams, exists. And I want to start off by thanking Alan Wright. He's known as Bold Outlaw on all the social media. He's a Robin Hood enthusiast and historian. Bold Outlaw. You can also hear him on Straight Out of the Federation, of Blake 7 podcast. Delvin Sims, he's DJ Merc, M-E-R-C, buys music on Apple Music, and he's the sound of the Right On Network. We have Tim Price, the podcrasher himself. Check him out on the OutKasters podcast. We have Cluck Trent, friend of the Right On Network, Kevin Fedorkowski. We have Mark Blair. Listen to him on Feathers and Foes, a Birds of Prey podcast. We have Paul Hicks over in Australia. Hello, Paul. He does Waiting for Doom, DCOCD, The Gary Show, and Dial Left for Flanger. Laurel Phillips. You can hear her moderating Feathers and Foes, a Birds of Prey podcast, and the Huntress podcast, where we talk about Helena Wayne and Helena Bertinelli, respectively. We have the Irredeemable Shag. He's over at the Fire and Water Podcast Network. He does Once Upon a Geek, where just like on the Record Jams, is about celebrating your joy. He's just talking about things and pop culture that he likes. And he has JSA Presents, and now it's JSA Presents in the 1990s, Justice Society of America. Episode 0 was great. I'm ready for episode 1. And we have Justin Steiner at Shoe Fly Pie. He blogs about music. Shoe Fly Pie, like Shoe Fly Don't Bother Me. Justin Steiner, thank you. We have Rick from Jeff and Rick Present, and Chris Pine. So thank you, Patreon subscribers. They went to patreon.com/Right On Network, or they went to the HuntressPodcast.com. They click that Patreon button, and Bob's your uncle. So we truly appreciate that, guys. And if you want to be a patron of the Right On Network, we would truly appreciate it. Keep these lights on. So until next time, it has been Arthur and AJ. Bye-bye, everyone. Keep jamming.
Guys. Please.